Hello, Deb Schaefer. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Kathy. It's nice to be here.
Deb is one of the most beautiful souls I know. She's a long standing friend, a fascinating person. And I'm so excited to have Deb on the show. We're talking about a good death. I think our culture doesn't talk about death enough. And truly, I believe when we talk about these things like death and loss, it can help us live more fully and more joyfully now. What's your thoughts, Deb?
I agree with you. It's a difficult subject, obviously, because it involves a lot of sadness and heartache and heartbreak. But if you can look back at like the healing process, I think you can find a joyful end to the very sadness that you experience.
Yes. So before we jump in, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about you? And I'll preface this by saying Deb and I worked as attorneys together for the Attorney General a few years ago when we were both practicing. Deb still practices law. And we've been friends ever since. It's been a few decades, but she is one of my dearest friends, a soul sister. Deb also helps me run my Facebook group, the Joyful Purpose Community. It's a free Facebook group with over 200 women. We try to share inspiring tips. And if you're interested, come over and join us. Deb's been out of commission a bit because of everything she's been going on, but she tells me she's coming back in soon. So anyway, Deb, tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll jump into your story.
Yes, I love the group that you mentor, the Facebook group, the private groups, and I really feel like it's helped me throughout the course of my life, and having you as a friend has been really an amazing thing. And the last few years have been really special for me because I've seen for myself just expanding my desire to study more spiritual things and personal development, and just growing my own personal practice in that area and aligning with you in the same way. It's been really special. And I'm sorry I've been like not in commission with the Facebook group. You know, it's just been really tricky because to share joy when you're experiencing some sorrow and trying to figure it out yourself is just very tricky. And I'm coming through it with your help and with all my practices. So I'm getting there, and I thank you for your patience, but I do love reading what people are saying and obviously supporting you in that for sure.
Oh, we love having you here. So just tell us a little bit about us. You're a practicing lawyer, and tell us a little more about your family and anything else you want to share.
Okay, I'm a practicing attorney. I'm coming near the final of my career, really. I can foresee that ending in the next few years, but it's exciting too. I feel like I'm ready for some changes and some personal growth. But I have 2 teen boys, and they're going to be going off to college soon. And my husband and I are kind of re-establishing our new relationship as potentially empty nesters. My mother passed away last December, which was extremely hard for me, despite her being older. And, you were there for me as a soft landing with so many things that I went through on many different levels that I feel like I don't think I could have gotten through it. And I still don't think I can keep going through it without having you as my backup.
Oh, you're so kind. And I don't think that's totally true, but I so appreciate it. And I'm glad I'm helpful in any way I can. So that's one of the things I want to talk about is your mom's death, because just the story behind it, I was so moved by it. I was so moved by how your mother handled it and how you handled it with your family. And it was just really beautiful because, first of all, you and your mom had an incredibly close relationship. She was like one of your soulmates, I guess. Or how would you describe your relationship with your mother?
I feel like we knew each other in a past life. That's how close we were. And I don't know why we were so close, other than I think I was single for a long time and she was my partner, like always with me all the time and traveling all the time. And I really loved her like a friend in addition to being a mother. And I think she knew that. She often told me, I have some siblings, and people would always tease that I was the favorite. And I was like, Mom, I don't really understand that. How do you explain that? And she would say things like, well, I love my children the same. Also, you love them how they love you. And I loved her as a friend and sought her out at her advice. And I lived her advice all the time. I still quote her to this day to my kids. And I would not be the woman that I am today in my profession, in my marriage, as a mother, without the depth of her love and contribution to my life. I can't say enough about it. And everybody who's met her knows that about her.
Yeah, she's a beautiful woman.
Yes, she lived 84 years, and not all those years were very healthy, but for the most part, she pained through a lot of things, and she didn't do a lot of complaining, even though you knew she was in a lot of pain. But with respect to how she passed, it was kind of expected because she's 84, but unexpected because it did happen over a period of 9 months relatively quickly. And the last time I saw her in good health would have been March of 2022, which actually is one of the photographs we used. I take pictures all the time of her when I see her. And that was one of the photographs we used at her memorial service, is one we specifically took when she was standing alone in front of her lake.
Beautiful. So Deb, take us back to December of 2022 regarding your mom and the whole situation and what happened.
Well, my whole family had planned to meet at Christmas time. We were planning a reunion, and this had been in the process for 9 months before my mom even became super ill. We were going to rent a beach house and all be together for a family vacation. That was her plan for us. So we did that. However, hurricanes last September wiped out the whole area where we were going to stay. So we ended up canceling the booking and staying in her home, near the home, which we didn't realize at the time that she was becoming so sick that this was part of the orchestration of her death, that in hindsight, we couldn't believe how it all played out, just because so much happened with all of us being there, my family, my sister's family, the cousins were all there, and how we just got to be together. And we knew immediately when we got there the Saturday before she passed that she was extremely compromised. I hadn't seen her that sick, and we were staying up all night sort of watching her. It was very shocking to see her like that, but it's almost as if she knew something was happening to her. In fact, she had previously planned to have the kids go to Disney World. That was their trip in Florida. There's Disney right there, and they always go, but this is the first time that all the cousins went together on their own. And there were 6 of them, and they had a blast. And but that was the day that she chose to pass, which I found extremely interesting, but yet comforting, because I wouldn't have wanted my children to experience what we experienced. Even though it was beautiful, it was very difficult for all of us.
Yeah. So it sounds like your mom, she orchestrated this whole plan to have the kids gone, but doing something they loved, and she wanted them doing that, and yet having her whole family around when she was dying.
And a few other things that happened, which I found really interesting, because when we originally landed and saw how compromised she was, we actually called in hospice to come in. And I couldn't get through to anybody from hospice because of the holiday. So finally, when we got through, the gal came to the house on the day that she passed and said, she's end stage and she probably has 12 hours or 24 hours or something like that. But something occurred to me that if she was in hospice earlier, she would have most likely been heavily sedated and non-communicative or sleeping. And we wouldn't have had the same interaction that we had with her during the few days before she passed. And I do think that that's something she would have really wanted. She wanted to be in our presence, and she knew that we were there. She was losing her ability to communicate, but she knew that we were there, and we were all able to be with her and love on her and all those beautiful things. However, she also knew that something was happening with her body. And at one point, I believe it was even the day before she died, she looked at me when I was walking with her and she said, "Am I dying?" And I was kind of shocked by that, because my mom's been sick before, but she's never said anything like that to me before. And I didn't really know how to respond, but I said, Mom, you're very sick and we don't know what's going to be happening, but you're very sick. So that was comforting for her and for me. But it struck me as odd that something else was going on here that was beyond me. And we just got the sense that she was not long. And we were actually planning to bring her to visit with us in Chicago, my sister and I, just to get her to be with her, because we knew that she was very sick. And we thought, well, maybe we could spend some time with her. I figured she had at least 6 months, or I don't know.
And none of us know.
Right. That's another one of the lessons, right? From a good death. And I don't use that word lightly when I say, a good death. But to me, a good death is recognizing that your loved one may be passing, that life is finite. We don't have an end date that we know of, and really giving them what they need in their final moments. And she pretty much orchestrated this. We just happened to play along. We played along with her because she's like, I want a vacation. I want everybody here. And even before she passed, we had seen her several times, and she had said to one of my nieces that everybody's coming for Christmas, right? Everybody's coming for Christmas. So she wanted us there. She knew we were going to be there. So something was happening on a spiritual level that we got to experience.
Well, I remember a hospice. I mean, I've had several loved ones die, unfortunately, and die way sooner than anyone thought they would. But I heard a hospice nurse say once that if the person wants you there by their side, they will. And you could be sitting by their side the whole time, but then you might go to the bathroom for 2 minutes and they might die then because they didn't want you there. So it's like I don't know, for many people, it seems like there's an element of some consciousness and ability to say, to let go, I guess.
Right. I would say I believe that 100%, especially in light of the fact that none of the kids were there at the time that it happened, and that her daughters were there and her close friends. And we even had a woman from her church who had been calling, and we didn't really know how to talk to this woman because my mom was so sick and she wasn't accepting visitors. But finally, on the day that she passed, we're like, maybe we should let her come and see my mom. Clearly she wants to see her. We asked my mother if she wanted to see her, and she said yes. And so the lady came to see us, and it was kind of ironic because my mother had been very combative during this time because she was end stages, and it's all those, passing experiences, fight or flight. We learned it's a lot of that. It was very hard to watch. But when this woman came up to her closely, she said, she reminded her who she was. And she said, would you like me to sing to you? And my mother said yes, and this lady was in the choir, but she started to sing, and my mother's body became immediately softened. And it was so beautiful, Kathy, that we were all moved to tears. We're standing around her bedside. We're seeing her stare into the eyes of this beautiful soul. And I'm thankful now that I had the presence of mind to press record on my recording device on my phone, because the songs were so beautiful. I wanted to always remember them. And you could still hear, my mom's breathing, and you could hear us in the background. And I have like 4 minutes of beautiful songs in my my mother's final moments here. And some people might think that is morbid, but it brings me so much comfort to know I was there during her last breath.
Yeah.
And I have her last breath with me whenever I need to experience that again.
It's so beautiful. I've shared with you, and I'll share with the audience, when one of my brothers passed away at 51, over probably 12 years ago. I don't even remember the exact date, but he was so ill, basically in a comatose state in hospice. And then his kids came to basically say goodbye. And the same thing, a man who was playing guitar and music came into the room and said, would you like to hear some music? My brother always loved the Beatles. And when the man came in and his kids were there, and my brother, who was like basically wordless for the past few days before, said yes. And he said, what do you want to hear? And he said, well, he said Beatles. And then he said, how about a Yellow Submarine? And so the man with the guitar started playing Yellow Submarine. And my brother literally sat up, held his kids' hands, and sang the song. It was one of the most beautiful moments. And he's smiling, and he's telling his kids not to cry. And he sings the whole song. And then basically after that song, he just lays back down and is completely out of it again, can't talk. He died, I think, a day or two later.
Wow, that is beautiful.
Yeah, it was really, it was like, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. It was, I don't know, there was just something beautiful about the acceptance and the also like, it's okay. And the peace around it that was, I don't know, beautiful to see, even though it was so sad.
It's almost like a miracle when you experience it like that, because you can see his physical body laying there, and then the spirit is so strong, it sits him up. It recalls a beautiful memory, and that's what his children can experience too. That lasting moment, which was so important for both. Did he have 2 or 3 children?
Three kids. All 3 kids were there. Yeah.
Experience all that. That's pretty much a miracle.
Yeah.
I feel like my mother's death, if you can even say it was a miracle. I mean, I never wanted to lose her. I couldn't even imagine. I still can't imagine that she's gone. When I think too hard about it, it breaks my heart. But I just feel like she prepared us very well for it. She talked about it. After my father died 5 years ago, she talked a lot about missing him, and she prepared us very well for her moving on from this world, or this life, I should say.
So after she actually passed, you had a service right in her home.
You know what, Kathy? It felt like 100 years ago type of a thing you would do, because my parents had their wishes, established. And my mother was older, and the services were just for our family, because we were the ones that were left, and we had too many family members were spread out a little bit. We couldn't really have a, wake service. So we kind of had our own wake service. And I'm so thankful for the hospice workers, because they pretty much explained, look, you can decide what you want to do here. So we were so grateful. And my beautiful mother, her beautiful essence, her earth essence, was still here with us. We had the hospice bed in the living room. We had already set it up, expecting her to be in there a few days, maybe a week. The kids hadn't even seen the reestablishment of the bed and everything moved, all the furniture. They were gone. So we literally just set this up that morning after they had left. And the whole room looked very different, which in hindsight is probably a good thing, because they can separate themselves a little bit from her passing in her chair. Ironically enough, her recliner that she sat in forever broke that day. And then she's in the hospice bed. The whole thing was crazy. But after she passed, she was on oxygen, and we were able to leave the oxygen going. And the hospice nurse said, you know what, that actually will preserve her.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
We're happy about. So, we really preserved her beautifully, and I was able to beautify her and spend some time with her and doing my favorite things like curling her hair and combing her hair and talking to her like I would do all the time, often. And I knew she would want to be beautiful for her grandkids when they came. And so there were mixed emotions going on about the right thing to do. We allowed the day to play out. And when the kids came home, it was a bittersweet meeting with them, with their grandma, because they didn't expect it. And there was some shock for all of us, really, because we were still in shock that it had happened. Right. But the kids, we got to spend hours with her, and they've got to spend hours with her alone. And we all did. And I guess if anybody can pass beautifully and privately and not be ill for too long and look the same as you did, she looked the same as she did. She looked like she was sleeping, and she was in her gown and just beautifully laid out. And I think that if there's a way to do it, I thought we did it quite beautifully.
Oh, no, it sounded so beautiful the way you describe it, and just doing it right in her home with family.
It was beautiful. It's a memory, you'll never forget. And it felt very peaceful to us to keep her close by. I couldn't have imagined sending her off, at that point.
Yeah.
I think she was extremely happy with that.
And then you recently did like a memorial celebration of life, and you want to share that?
Well, you know what? It was interesting because we had said our goodbyes. We hadn't really thought about doing anything. She lost so many friends and family that there really wasn't any thought about where do we do this. She lived in Florida. We were in Chicago. So, we weren't that connected with her people in Florida too much. But there were some family members that really needed to close this, to send her off. So we were like, this is good for all of us, especially the kids. So we planned a balloon release, biodegradable balloons. Apparently there's such a thing. And we all we created these beautiful t-shirts, and they were just in loving memory of her with our favorite photograph. We all wore red. And my husband created a soundtrack of all her favorite songs. The Golden Girls was playing. We did the balloon release. Anyone in 84 knows the Golden Girls. In fact, I think they need to come back. But that was something she listened to all the time. And so we did, all of our butterflies went off, and it was such a beautiful send off for her.
So nice. So beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's so interesting about your story is just, this was like your person. I mean, it was like losing a right arm for you. Is that a good way to say it?
Definitely a piece of my heart, for sure.
Right. Yet you are still a person who lives so fully and with joy and with purpose while you allow your grief. And could you say more about that? Because I think that's just a message that needs to be heard more.
I think my thought on loss, and I've had other loss besides my mother, is allowing the healing to happen and let it unfold in however it unfolds. Seeking community where you need it, and recognizing you're going to have these moments of extreme sadness. But also, I educated myself a little bit about my mother's passing. And, you're so curious about, am I going to get a sign? Am I going to see her or see some sign from her? Or is she here with me? Somebody told me once, in explaining the facts, I hadn't seen anything, right? You haven't experienced that. And so this person shared with me, I'm seeking, I'm talking with somebody who's helping me a lot about just going through my grief. She said, when you are so close with someone's here on earth and they're like a soul sister to you, your souls almost enmesh together, and you don't feel them because they're inside of you all the time. So you almost don't separate that. And I have a necklace that I wear that was my mother gave me, and I'll find myself periodically just grabbing on it, and I'm thinking that's her saying, I'm here, remember I'm here. But I definitely think seeking support where you need it and talking about it and just sharing memories helps, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And how do you find your joy still despite this significant loss for you?
Well, I don't think she would want me to be too sad. I really don't. And my mother, if you met her, well, you met her, but anybody who met her had a vibrant smile, and she was full of light. I can't stay sad too long, because even though she carried a lot of sadness in her own life, she was a very happy, vibrant person. And I really think that I am no good to anybody if I'm wallowing in grief. And there is a time and a place and a season for our grief, and finding outlets for it too. I found myself, I actually started a journal where I'm writing to her in the journal as if I was talking to her. And I'll tell her things and I'll share things with her. And believe it or not, she spoke to me. I had forgotten the name of one of her friends. I was writing in the journal and I said, I can't remember this lady's name. I did an underline and I said, it'll come to me at some point. And then later in the day, it came to me and I'm like, thanks, Mom. I feel like she reminded me of this lady. But it's just staying connected, even when they're not here. Hearing their voice in your head, hearing their words of wisdom.
Right. Because, the truth is love doesn't die. Yeah. Love doesn't die.
And what's your legacy? I mean, I think about that all the time for myself, because what's the legacy I'm going to leave for my voice? Are they going to hear my voice in their head? What are they going to remember about me? Are they going to remember my great love for them, for God, my practices, my spiritual practices? And that's what I think about my mother. She left an amazing legacy of love, and her arms stretched wide for such a tiny little lady.
Yes, yes. So what advice would you give to those of us who are listening, who are dealing with somebody who is either sick or someone who's elderly and may not have very long in this world? Again, none of us know. What advice would you give to them about how to honor those people in their lives?
Well, in the process, I found it really important to understand that, life does have an end. Nobody's going to live forever. And you really need to create an atmosphere of just love around the person, and try to see if you can follow their lead with what they might want for their end. And my mother expressed specifically the desire not to go to a hospital. In fact, the Friday before she passed, I was on the phone with her, and she had been having a medical sort of emergency that the doctor wanted her to go to the hospital. Her oxygen levels were dropping, and she told me on the phone, I don't want to go to the hospital. And I found that strange that we would just segue into that conversation. I'm like, Mom, you don't have to go to the hospital. So know the person's wishes, of course. And a lot of people have, their wishes laid out. And I was extremely lucky to be her trusted person. So I made sure that we honored that, and everybody was in agreement. Of course, it's such a hard time, but I think they want to know that they're safe and they're loved and that there's nothing to be afraid of passing. I did experience this firsthand with my mother because I know she had some sadness here with different family members that she was taking care of. And I reassured her and I took her in my arms. This was a few hours even before she passed. And I said, Mom, please don't worry about these people. I have them. I will care for them and I will love them like you love them. And you can rest assured. And I even said, she was leaving her beautiful home. And I said, we're going to take care of your home. And I could actually sense her shoulders like just relaxing because she's leaving these things. She's leaving her beloved home that she lived for 30 years. She's leaving friends and family that she only took care of. So she wanted to know that they were going to be okay. And
okay, so giving reassurances, if you can, that are true, right? You'll carry on things. What about for those of us who may struggle with some relationships with people who, a lot of times with parent and child relationships, there's unresolved conflict, resentment. What would you say to those people who have that?
I am a person who does not like conflict. So I'm an attorney. How can you be an attorney?
But what I'll say about you as an attorney, which I know is so true, you don't like conflict, but you don't lay down. I mean, you're not, nobody can walk over you. So you might not like conflict. I get it, but you are not afraid to give it back.
And that's true. And I look for resolution, and I look, because my heart, I think, is really big. I look for ways to figure out the person I'm dealing with and the conflict and really say, look, I don't want this conflict. How can we resolve it? I've had people in my life that don't want to be a part of my life. I understand that and I have to let that go. But if they want to be a part of my life and we have a relationship that's struggling, let's figure out how to fix it if we can. But I did say to my mom, I said, I have two sisters and I love my sisters dearly. And I'm like, we are together now. It's the three of us. It's the three musketeers now. We are here and we are going to bond together as best as we know how to keep your beautiful love legacy alive. And that's what I would say.
Beautiful. What about somebody who might have a conflict with their parent? It's a loving relationship, but it's not close because there's unresolved issues. What would you say to them? And their parent is passing. And again, it doesn't have to be a parent. It could be a loved one who issues are not, they're unresolved. What would you say to them?
Well, my thought would be personally, even though my mother and I had an amazing lifelong friendship and love, there are things that I do regret that I did not do and did not pay attention to the relationship, spend a little time figuring out if there's something you can fix and resolve, or just let's just agree to disagree and forgive this problem that we have. And let's just really love each other where we are now and for who we are now and be with that person. I went to see my mom 3 months before she passed, and I was such a busy bee in her house that she actually said to me, would you please sit down? Would you please stop moving? And I'm like, oh, I almost wish I could get back to that time.
Yeah, right. Right. Love this, though. Really appreciating the moments you have with loved ones in your life. And I think about that a lot, actually. I had two close friends die, Sean and Tracy, die rather unexpectedly in the last few years. And both of these women were very close to me. And it makes me so sad they are not here. But it also, I appreciate so much of our connection we had together. And I appreciate so much just what I learned from each of them. And I have so much gratitude for that. But I think about moments with them, just laughing about stupid things or I did a lot of traveling with Tracy and our families and think about those moments, and so grateful for that. And those are the moments, right? Those are the moments you remember and you want more of. But it's about appreciating it right now.
Really, I mean, honestly, I've had people say to me, these days aren't going to last. And, my own child, like, hey, mom, you're going to miss these when we're gone. Meaning like when they're at school or away or not living with us. And it's very true.
It is so true. My youngest is going to be a junior in the summer. And I'm like, boy, any minute she wants to spend with me, I am all in because, I know it's not going to stay this way. And I want to create fun times with her. So yeah, it's appreciating the now. So I want to turn to two. I mean, you've had other losses and you had a really significant one 18 years ago where you were pregnant and your beautiful daughter died and you still had to deliver her.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such a horrible, horrible loss. If you want to share a little bit about that. And the reason I'm bringing this up too, as well, is again, because your story of loss, like we all have in our lives, but the way you transformed it, still allowing your grief and having joy is so beautiful.
Right. Just the different type of loss with a person who's lived 84 years and another person who's never had a chance to breathe life on this earth. And my one and only pregnancy ended in a stillborn baby at 31 weeks. And it was a very shocking time for me because it was unexpected. And, we had so many plans. Obviously, I've since been involved with groups that knowing that this is such a widespread silent sort of suffering with women who go through stillborn or miscarriages or infant loss in general. We were pregnant in 2005 and my baby was going to be delivered in October of 2005, passed in August. We had just finished like our last Lamaze class and I was so happy and excited and we're planning the shower and everything and my mom was going to come in and we were making the diaper cake and everything and all that fun stuff. So it was really a shock because it happened very quickly and I knew something strange was happening. And after she passed, the hospital that we were part of sent these amazing angels to help us with this process. It was such a dark time that I can't even believe there was any light shining. But these 3 nurses are part of this organization and they really descended upon us like angels, I said. Mm-hmm. And it's very strange what was happening with me because my husband and I did not want to know the sex of the baby. We were going to be surprised. So these strange things were happening when they told me we were going to have to deliver the baby. I'm like, well, I don't want to know what it is. How am I even having the presence of mind to even have these discussions?
Your baby is dead and you have to deliver her.
And I'm like, well, let's don't know. until after she's born. So it was very strange because we didn't want to know. And then after that we delivered, we saw the baby and it was a little girl. And my husband and I, we had a name that we were going to name the baby if it was a girl. And we made the decision because it was so horrible. I didn't want the name to be part of that process that we had previously arranged for the name. So, and when we spoke about her, we went through the process of fertility treatment. So we knew, we saw our baby at 11 weeks. I saw the light when the light could be seen initially, so early on, much more so than other pregnancies. So we saw that light so early. And I remember all the joy and the happiness that we experienced up until that point. And so my husband and I talked about what we would name the baby. And they expressed that it is important, obviously, to name the baby. She was like a pound. I said, let's name her Joy. Let's name her Joy. Because whenever we say her name, we will be forced to think of the joy and the reflection of what she brought us up to this point. Again, how did we have the presence of mind to pick that name? We named her Joy Angel because she is an angel. So, but going through that, I do know that my life, and I could speak for my husband too, we grieved separately together. We parallel grieved, if there's such a thing. There's parallel play with children. We parallel grieved. We were 2 hollow human beings grieving together alone. And I remember one of our wonderful, beautiful friend said, take our cottage up in Canada, go for as long as you need to go. So we took our leave or whatever. We drove 6 hours. We went through all the beautiful cards in the car, and we holed away up on Lake Huron alone and just being together alone. But we saw hummingbirds, we saw flowers, and it was part of that really helped us heal. But I remember my friend who offered us her cottage, she did say something to me that I've never forgotten. And she said, everybody grieves differently, and there is no wrong way to grieve. And she did say, you do what you need to do. You take care of you, no matter how selfish someone might think that that is, because you will get through it if you take care of yourself.
So beautiful.
And then, Kathy, one thing I wanted to say is I did not see light in that darkness until about 2 months later. And it was ironically when my due date was in October, because my husband and I became part of an organization called the Still Mist. And it is a support group for infant loss, baby loss. And I'm still part of that group. I go there now to support others. But I remember going there and feeling so hollow, but seeing the faces of these people. And one gal had just lost her baby on the due date, so further along than me. And I remember seeing their sadness and feeling empathy and love for them. And I knew in that moment that I was healing. I was coming out the other end, because if I can feel love and sadness for someone else, I'm out of my own grief more. Does that make sense?
100%. And I just think that is such a beautiful testament to finding community when things are hard. I mean, I think finding community when things are great is so fun and makes life richer. But finding community with people who are experiencing the same thing can be so powerful. And I think that's how we get through life, because life is not all joy. We try, but it's also a lot of loss. How do you get through that? I believe one of the ways is you do it together. You do it with community. And that helps everything. Where you can laugh about things you couldn't laugh about with other people.
Yeah, you do have to find your people. You do. And because not everybody understands that kind of loss. And even there's so many levels of loss that we've seen when you're our age, right? Hey, we're beautifully young, but
yes, we are.
But I've certainly seen a lot. I've seen a lot.
Yes. So what would you tell people how to live a joyful life, even if you're experiencing great loss?
I would say that remember, the heart can heal. The heart can heal when you allow it. And I really would encourage people to take the steps to find the community that they need, to find the resources that they need, to find the meditations or the groups, a partner that understands and allows you to cry and allows you to just laugh, because people don't understand. You can laugh hysterically in the midst of sorrow.
Yes.
Because one thing can make you just crack up, and that emotion is as strong as crying, I think, laughing.
Yes, that's very true. That's very true.
It's interesting because my sisters and I, after my mother passed, there's three of us total, but my two sisters and I spent like 2 weeks together sort of going through her things. And it was a myriad of emotions all over the place, but it was so healing for me personally. And I was so thankful to have had those 2 weeks with them, because you don't get them now. I'm married, they have lives, we have lives. You just don't have that. And I know my mother would have been just thrilled with that.
Yes, that's beautiful. What is a daily joy practice for you for boosting your joy?
That's interesting. I have to say, I heard this once from somebody about I was doing a meditation once, and part of the meditation was taking a minute to smile, like in the meditation. And so I literally, before I even get out of bed, I smile. I just smile and I just say to myself, you know what? I have a little prayer that I pray about the day. And, I really try to experience the people in my life in joy. mean, I do meditation and I do like energy work just personally, but taking care of myself, recognizing what I need, and realizing that, you know what, I want to be my best self for the people that I live and love with. So,
And for yourself.
I do. And that's the number one is me, but I don't always hit it, but I really try.
Well, none of us are perfect. I'm always teaching what I want to learn more of. We got
to love the people that remind us of our imperfections too.
By the way, you need to, Deb did one of my mindset makeover coaching groups. We have a private Facebook group on that, but she posted this beautiful energy clearing practice she does. And you need to post that in our other group, the Joyful Purpose Community group, because I think people would really like it.
Yeah. I'm learning more about that all the time. And I'm learning about, just colors and the patterns of energy colors and all those things. And it really helps me personally. I think I would benefit from it too.
Yes. And that's one thing. I remember you were at one of my retreats and someone said, I just love that woman's energy, talking about you. And I go, I know. But you vibrate like this. If you met Deb in person, this love and this peace and this acceptance towards everyone. It's really beautiful.
I hope so. I don't want to be overbearing though. Sometimes the light can be too bright and people need sunglasses, right?
Well, as we talked about before, right? Like not everyone's going to like your light.
That's true. That's a good point. All the stuff. I mean, I've learned so much from you, Kathy. The past few years with being, through the pandemic and all that stuff, you hate to keep saying that word, but I really think it brought me to another level of just, our conversations and all that I learned speaking with you and being part of your groups and the coaching groups. I love your 4-week, 6-week programs. I mean, those things, this past one that we just finished this summer was just great. And the women are amazing. And I learned so much. And it's just like a recharge. It's like a reboot.
What helped you most in our last group?
I really think that the commitment to the process and making a personal commitment to the mantra that we all had our personal mantras that we came up with. And I wrote mine down and just saying it, practicing it, and having it just be like a daily commitment. That's the key.
Yeah.
What do you say about it?
It's so simple. What we worked on was so simple, but I think what was powerful too is having people find their own, well, first of all, what they really wanted or wanted to change, and why, and then honing in on the words that resonated for them. I think that's what, in my view, made a difference for many.
Right. The word. There's a better word for something you're struggling with that can help you turn it into a positive, more of a joyful outcome as opposed to a heavy process.
Well, also what we tell ourselves, our thoughts create our feelings. And if we're telling ourselves a bunch of really negative stuff, I guarantee there's equally true thoughts that are not fake that you can believe and focus on if you choose to. That's a difference. It's not fake positive thinking. It's finding just as true thoughts that you can focus on that will make you feel different.
And it's like the topic today with the good death. It's, yes, if I focus purely on her passing, it's not helpful to me. But if I focus on her life, her legacy, what I have for my kids in the future, then it helps me. It's just turning it around.
Right. But also, I think it's important too. You also have allowed your grief in a beautiful way. You don't deny it. And I think that's important for people too, it's okay to grieve. It's okay to have negative emotion. Hello. We're not always happy. We cry sometimes, we're angry, we're annoyed, to allow it and then decide, okay, well, where do I want to put my attention now?
Well, and I heard someone say like my mother was probably my great love in my life. And so I lost her. And even though she was 84, when that final moment happens, the person could be 104. I mean, if it's your person, if it's a pillar in your life, then you have to deal with that. You have to get through that grief and find that joy bubble at the end,
Right. And again, it's just about, we all have loss, and the older we get, we're going to have more losses. And it's like, how do you weather that, honor it, and move forward with joy?
Yes.
Deb and I were talking about this. You looked up grief, the definition of grief, and what did you come up with?
What I looked up was, what is the opposite of grief? And only one word came up, and that was the word joy. And I found that extremely informative, because most times you can find 50 words that come up for something, but the one opposite of grief was the word joy. And that's very telling.
Oh, that's beautiful. It's so telling too, because you named your daughter Joy,
Right.
despite the immense grief around it.
And your podcast and your purpose, joyful purpose. That's the idea. If you can live your life as joyful as possible, seeking joy and helping others to find their joy, I think it's a great work.
Well, thank you. But I also think, and that's why I named it, there weren't any podcasts that talk about joy and purpose together, because sometimes purpose can be so heavy. And to me, it's like, if you can focus on your joy, you will find purpose. I just believe that. I've seen it over and over.
Right.
And, if there were more joyful people walking around, our world would be better.
Yes.
Just saying.
Just saying. Right. Smile at a stranger, right? All right. We digress.
All right. So any other tips or advice you want to share with anybody about creating a good life now so that you have a good death?
Right. Because I'm a living well enthusiast. And I really think, honestly, there is no point in being overly heavy. There's a time and a place for that. But to me, if you can focus on what brings you joy, just finding your happiness and your purpose, what brings you joy. I love to write. I love to, express joy that way. And that brings me a lot of happiness. But your truth. You know what brings you happiness.
So I think that's an important point, right? So to be authentically yourself brings me a lot of joy. I know it brings a lot of people a lot of joy when they're authentically themselves. They're not trying to pretend to be something they're not. I also love, for listeners, if you want a good exercise, I think this is a really powerful coaching exercise, is just to write what you would have on your tombstone. It sounds like a little, at first, like, oh my God, I don't want to think about it. But I promise you, you think about these things now, no matter how old you are, because by the way, none of us know our expiration date. We think we do, but we don't. But to think what you would want on your tombstone, I think is a powerful exercise, because it will help you focus today on what's important.
And along those same lines, I have to say, one of the hardest things I ever did in my life was write an obituary for my mother. I didn't even want to do it, but in writing it, it was very healing for me, because I got to live her life through that. And that's another possible exercise, is to write your own, because what would you say to those people left? What is it you want people to know about yourself? What is it that you want to leave? Really, truly.
What would you want to say?
That's too hard.
How about give me one liner of what you want, not the whole thing.
I'm going to do it in terms of my kids, what they would say. My mother loved us big, hard, deep.
I love it.
Was very selfless in her love for us.
Yes, that's very true. I would also say Deb is. We don't want any was yet for you.
No, we don't.
A loving light to all. That's what I would say. That's just one thing. I'd say a lot of other things, but a loving light to all. And
maybe that's a program, Kathy, we could have just sort of secretively.
All right.
What would we do?
Well, we're doing more together in the future. We got to. Anything else you want to share with our listeners about what you've been through that could help them?
Love the ones you're with, and just make sure you do engage with them purposefully, not just on the fly,
Yeah. All right, Deb, this has been such a fun and beautiful conversation about living well despite death. I just wanted to add, I think it's just so important. I did this silent meditation retreat. I'm a student of many practices, including a student of Buddhism, but I love the idea that contemplating your death every day that you're going to get sick. We're all going to get sick. We're all going to die. We're all going to get old. At first, it's very depressing. But honestly, when I think about it more, it actually helps me live more fully. What would you say about that, Deb?
I think that's a very good point. And trying to be your healthiest, your most kind, loving self, I absolutely would agree 1,000%.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, my dear. This has been so fun. I know the listeners are going to love it. So I'll put Deb's Instagram handle in the show notes. If you're a fabulous woman, join our free Facebook community, Joyful Purpose community on Facebook. We'd love to have you. And thank you so much for listening. And Deb, you want to say anything else as we say goodbye?
Just live well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anita Yokota, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, I'm so delighted you're here. Anita, you are so impressive on so many levels.